Good morning and welcome back. I'm Andre Chassé, AARP Maine Volunteer State President and a resident of Bangor. Thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to our volunteers who are here today and who have helped make this event such a great success. In particular, I want to mention Grace McCarthy of Bodenham, who spearheaded this event and worked so hard to bring it to fruition. Grace, thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the second part of our program, which is a panel discussion featuring local and national experts. Please feel free to ask questions. If you are here in the hall, we have microphones in each of the aisles. If you are on Zoom, please put your question in the chat, and a volunteer here will ask the question on your behalf. First, we welcome again Erin West, founder and president of Operation Shamrock. Secondly, joining us from the AARP Fraud Watch Network, we are delighted to welcome Liz Buser, Senior Fraud Prevention Advisor. Third, we welcome Andrew McCormack, the Assistant United States Attorney for Maine. Finally, we're honored to be joined by Maine Attorney General Erin Frey, who will moderate today's discussion. Erin, I'll hand it over to you.
Andre, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. All right. Well, if you can't, make sure to jump on up. Thank you all for joining us, both here in the theater and those online. I appreciate this opportunity that AARP has made available, because I hope what you walk away with today, if nothing else, it's that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Like, the more you can do at the front end to prevent yourself from being made that mark that I think Erin West did a really good job at describing, the more you can protect yourself and your loved ones from what is really awful activity. So today we do have some tremendous panelists that, if I do my job right, we'll be able to get a lot of their perspective and expertise out for you to take advantage of and apply in your own lives. What I'm going to ask, we had a really good introduction from Erin West, so you had an opportunity to understand where she came from. I'm just going to ask our panelists to provide a little bit of information about their background so that you can, again, understand what it is that they're coming from and how they're presenting it. So, Liz, I'm going to start with you. If you could please just tell us a little bit about what motivates you to be out here today.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Liz Buser, Senior Advisor on the Fraud Prevention Programs team at AARP. In my role, I work with our internal partners, like everyone in AARP Maine, everyone in our other 52 state offices, as well as external partners like government agencies like the Department of Justice and others, to empower consumers to spot scams and fraud. We don't want to scare you. We want you to feel empowered, and it really takes a village to get the information out there. And in addition to that, I co-run the AARP Fraud Victims Support Group. It's a safe space where fraud victims can attend virtual Zoom sessions to know they're not alone and to heal from the emotional impact of fraud victimization. And as Noelle said earlier, all of our resources are available to anybody of any age. So I've been with AARP for 15 years now, with the Fraud Watch Network since 2019, and thrilled to be here.
Andrew, please.
Hi, I'm Andrew McCormack. I'm an assistant U.S. attorney with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm in Bangor, but we have offices in Bangor and Portland. And I won't go into too much about my background. I initially started as a prosecutor in the child exploitation section in Washington, D.C., and then I came to Maine in 2012. And about a decade ago, the Department of Justice, realizing all of these issues that we're going to be talking about today, created something called the Elder Fraud Initiative. And basically, we have multiple meetings. We have multiple prosecutors who are involved in trying to stop elder fraud in a variety of levels. It's not only economic fraud, but also nursing home issues, physical abuse issues. And as part of that, they have designated that every office in the United States has to designate somebody as the Elder Justice Coordinator. And since 2018, I have been that person for our office. And so as part of that, I prosecute cases that deal with elder fraud, whether they're in Portland or Bangor or anywhere throughout the state of Maine. But more importantly, what I've done, and it's a little bit of a new thing for me, but not as much as new as it used to be, is engaging in education, because I think what we're going to talk a lot about today is I don't feel that it's part of a process, but we're not going to prosecute ourselves out of this issue. And so what I try to do is go around the state. I've had a really positive relationship with AARP, which our office appreciates, and going around and trying to educate people about what to look out for and how to stop a case coming across my desk, because I don't want to see that case and I want to stop it before it happens.
And so let's jump right in. And Erin, I don't mean to shortchange it. You had the introduction. I know I was riveted by her presentation, and I'm looking forward to hearing more as we apply what we got the background from Erin West as to sort of where it is that we're being targeted from in a really powerful way. And so hopefully we're going to hone down in on how we can protect in this front end. I want to start with you, Liz, because one of the things that my office, the calls that we get, the people that we work with, the victims whose stories that we hear, it seems as though there are some real commonalities, particularly when it comes to seniors, right? Because as Erin had mentioned in her presentation, as Noel had mentioned when he introduced this today, there is no one type of person who can be scammed. You could be 18, you could be 81, you are eligible to be scammed. But seniors in particular do have some common characteristics. What, in your experience, has been those common characteristics that lead people to target seniors?
So I want to reiterate that anybody, as you said, can fall victim to fraud, old or young. And actually, the Federal Trade Commission data, what's reported to them has shown that younger adults report having money stolen from them more frequently than older adults. It's just that older adults have so much more money. The losses are so much higher. So why are they targeted? Well, first of all, that's where the money is. So they've got a lifetime of savings. They perhaps have housing wealth, a pension, even Social Security checks are a draw to the criminals. And so that's only part of the reason, though. Older adults were also raised to have a deep respect for authority, like law enforcement, for example. Loneliness and social isolation can be problematic, especially if the scammer, earns your trust and it feels like they're the only one that you can talk to. And then I do want to mention cognitive decline can sometimes play a factor. But if it was just about cognitive decline, how could we explain why so many younger adults are targeted? So those are some of the reasons why we think older adults are targeted.
And have you experienced whether or not there's been a resistance to reporting that may be more characteristic of those who are older, who have been scammed, that maybe plays into some of this as well?
So we know fraud is significantly underreported, right? And blame and shame are a huge reason why fraud victims think that it's their fault. They don't realize that the money was stolen from them and that the criminals are basically hijacking their brain, getting them what we refer to and the criminals refer to as getting them under the ether. So all the logical thought process goes out the window and emotion takes over. And so their families, though, don't understand that it's not the victim's fault, it's the criminal's fault. And so older adults especially are afraid that, if they tell their kids, maybe their kids will disown them. And unfortunately, we have seen that. They are afraid of losing their independence, maybe that their finances will be taken over. Maybe they'll be forced to move into a nursing home. It's kind of a snowball effect. And so I think that contributes to some of the underreporting amongst older adults.
And Erin, can I just add one thing as well, too? And I think, I sort of, maybe my dad wouldn't appreciate me using as an example, but he passed away a few years ago, so tough luck for my dad. But my dad, he passed away in his 80s, and he had, some ability on the computer. And like for example, today is not always a good example. Grace was getting me parked in on an app I wouldn't have known how to use. But my dad was very good at finding Scottish soccer games on the internet, but had a lot of trouble with other things on there. So I think that, if you're younger, you've grown up with computers, and my dad didn't, and he was learning, but still it was a little bit, not quite at the level of somebody who was a little bit younger, who had grown up with that. And I think that makes you more vulnerable as well, too, not quite as used to seeing the types of things that people have been seeing for years since they were born, basically, who were younger.
And if I could add on to that, AARP does have an affiliate called Senior Planet, and they have free resources to help you understand technology and that. So I think it's seniorplanet.org, but I can double check the link after in case folks are interested.
And Erin, is this consistent with what you would see as to what it would be that would drive scammers towards seniors in particular?
Definitely, yes. But I would echo what Liz said in that what they're going after is kindness, is trust, is essentially, kind, lonely people of any age. And the loneliness shouldn't be a stigma. And I think that for a lot of people, that is a stigma. But the fact is, there are a lot of people who are just alone these days because of what happened with COVID, and that people aren't back in the workforce. And so, yeah, definitely, I think what scammers are able to prey on is our natural kindness and trust, and our genuine want for community and relationships.
This adds a good transition point. I'm going to turn to you, Andrew. So there are common characteristics that we see in really all scams. And I'm wondering if from your perspective as somebody who's been educating, talking with people who have been victimized by this, what are the common characteristics of the scams that you see, just to help everybody sort of understand what it is they might be looking for when these characteristics pop up?
Yeah, so I really appreciate going to these events, because what I've learned today from Erin has been fantastic. I mean, a lot of stuff that I was not aware of before I sat down here today. But what I've learned in terms of, and I learned this from Jane, actually, from AARP, and Liz is explaining it, is that they talk about this process of going under the ether in terms of like getting a scam to work. And there are several factors that are involved, but some of the factors that are involved is isolation. And so what they want to do is make it that the person who is the subject of the scam is only speaking to the scammer. They'll give you whatever reason about how you can't reach out to a friend, or you can't reach out to your son or daughter, you can't reach out to your spouse even. So that's one thing, is isolation. The other thing that they also talk about is that there's an urgency involved, right? That this is something that needs to get done right now. And it's always, and if it doesn't happen, there's going to be some very, very dire consequence that comes about as a result of the fact that you haven't done what you need to do. And a lot of times, your own personal health or safety can be threatened, but it also often is relatives' health and safety can be threatened. So that's another factor. And then another thing that gets done is that they're asking for money quickly, right? And that's, one of the things, and again, all of these are things that can be dealt with, but typically pretty early on in the process, they're asking for you to provide funds to them in some type of way that doesn't seem exactly normal, a gift card that they want you to do, a wire, something along those lines. So those are sort of more common aspects that we see, again, about putting somebody under the ether, so that maybe if they had had a chance to think about the scam, they might have realized what it was, but they're being asked to address it so quickly that they don't have time to sort of go through it logically and figure out what's going on.
Could I add to that? What we are doing in our education at AARP, and a lot of our partners are doing, and echoing what you just said, we think there's, for about 80% of the scams, there's 3 key indicators. So you get an unexpected communication, so contact out of the blue, that gets you into a heightened emotional state, and it could be fear, excitement, love, and it involves urgency. And usually that urgency is an urgent request through payment via an unconventional payment method like cryptocurrency, wire transfer, gift card, gold bars, crypto, cash, you name it. And so what we're trying to tell folks is, if you have those 3 indicators, you should pause, reflect, protect. So try to engage with your logic instead of your emotion to help you avoid falling victim.
One more thing I just want to add in before I follow up on that point about the uncommon way of transferring money, right? I also want to add that they might also be asking for personal information. So when we talk, I think we all know this, but just to make sure, right, we're talking about social security number, we're talking about bank account information, we're talking about date of birth, the stuff that for some reason people put up on Facebook, and I don't understand why, right? Not their social security number, but I hope. But I mention this because there are different ways in which the person who is trying to get something from you is going to use that something, either because they're going to convert it into tapping into credit, which is something else that seniors have probably a lot better than some younger, or they'll use it against you a little bit later on, which of course we heard about from Erin West's presentation when she was talking about how there's a long con that ends up happening by getting to know you and learning information about you. And so, Erin, picking up on what Liz had just touched upon as to the different ways in which either money or information might be converted, can you dig in a little bit more? Because you talked some about this in your presentation, but can you dig in a little bit more on how scammers are converting the resource from the victim, whether it be information or money, into what it is that they're able to use for their misdeeds?
Yes, and I'd say I love the way AARP is framing these three characteristics because they're right on the money. And the way the money is moving is they have to find a way that makes sense to the victim to move money. So for seniors, it can be easiest for them to go buy gift cards. That can be a lot easier than asking them to invest in cryptocurrency. But even when they do cryptocurrency, they will figure out a way to make it doable by the aging population. But what we're seeing is really they will use any scheme that any way that money is being moved, they will have a piece of it. And we're seeing one of the most frightening ones is my sister called me and she said, she lives in the house we grew up in. And she said, do you know Mrs. Roberts across the street just handed a courier a bag with $20,000 in cash in it? I mean, we're seeing that. We're seeing movements by couriers. We're seeing victims asked to buy gold bars. We're seeing gift cards. We're seeing cryptocurrency. We're seeing bank wires. Literally any means of moving money will go to the scammer, and then they will figure out their ways to convert that back into something that is useful to them.
When you mentioned the thing about the courier and bags of money, there was an audible gasp from folks here in the auditorium. That has happened in Maine. So the extent to which folks think that this might be something that is far away, it is fortunate, at least in the cases that we're aware of, that not only did somebody think to make the report, but there was local law enforcement who was available to stop that, to interdict that courier because somebody did have the wherewithal to report that activity. And it was over something like they had to pick up money for bail or they had to pick up money to pay for like a tax debt. I got to tell you, it's hard enough to get a call into the government. You're probably not going to be getting a call from your local county jail or from the IRS saying that we're coming to get you, because that's just not how.
And Erin, I just want to say, we may be thinking there was a string of those cases, I think, for a while that took place. And I think the thing that's particularly scary about the drop-off is that, look, all of this is bad, but it's really worrisome when you have one of the scammers showing up at your door to pick up a pile of money, right? Like or a gold bar. So those were particularly worrisome. And again, the case that we were dealing with, that was a Canadian group that was sort of running that operation. And, that was attempting that was doing, they had a similar, probably not as large as the ones that Erin were talking about, but it was a Canadian group that was running that show. Yeah.
And if I could add one thing, we're fortunate enough to know so many brave fraud survivors who are out there telling their stories. So I want to encourage you to go to aarp.org/fraudwars. We launched a YouTube series last year, and in particular, check out the videos of Judith Boivin and Mary Ellen Strange, because what you just mentioned, where the couriers come and get the cash and the gold bars, that's what they experienced. and they talk about it in greater detail there.
Now, Liz, I'm gonna stay with you. If you could talk a little bit more, or a little bit in depth about the kind of technology or the way in which scams are being directed. So, text, email, robocall, AI. Like, in your experience in talking with folks who have been victimized, but also in terms of what you follow with your work with the AARP, what are the common ways? It used to be Western Union, right? Like where you'd get a phone call in Western Union, or the Nigerian prince, which Erin West had mentioned. The lottery with the Nigerian prince that you get an email. What technology? How are we seeing it used now to perpetuate these frauds?
Sure. So scammers are targeting all of us, through phone calls, text messages, emails still, all those methods. We certainly have seen AI, artificial intelligence, play a role, because whereas before, it might have been easier to figure out what emails were phishing and whatnot, like what emails were coming from scammers. Maybe there was grammatical errors and all of that. But what the criminals are doing is they're using AI to write these grammatically perfect messages, to create new and fake websites, to make it look like you're actually investing in a legitimate platform. So they're definitely leveraging technology. One thing that's been heartbreaking to see when talking to fraud victims is how the criminals have used AI to video chat with them. So in our support group, for example, one participant, the criminal used AI to impersonate their grandchild in a grandparent scam, and she had money stolen that way. Another victim thought that she was talking to a military service member, and so she had done her research. She had asked to see his driver's license. She had asked to verify all this information, and the scammer was using AI to video chat with her. And then a third example, particularly scary, is we had someone that we know who had been victimized the first time. Then she saw on Facebook that a friend of hers was talking about some great investment opportunity, and sent her friend a message on Facebook Messenger. They ended up setting up a Zoom, and she thought that she was talking to her friend. It wasn't her friend, it was a criminal. And it wasn't until a couple days later when she ran into her friend's sibling and was mentioning this investment opportunity, and he said, "That doesn't sound like my sister." And so he called his sister, and she's like, "No, that wasn't me. My Facebook account was hacked." So those are just a couple examples of what we're seeing and how the criminals are using technology to target us.
And I think another thing, and this applies to everybody, not just older Americans, but also going on to social media and gaining information about their victims and then using it, right? Figuring out, I know your granddaughter, I know whoever, so that you build up that friendly relationship, and they're able to do that by going through your Facebook or wherever it is that you're on and providing information that may be a little bit too much personal information, and that the scammers are using that against you.
And this actually provides a good tee up for really the next question. So when I've had the opportunity to talk with groups like this, I talk about my grandmother who had something like this happen, right? Thankfully, I had a conversation with her about sort of what a trending scam was at the time, the grandparent scam. Hopefully you've all heard about it. If not, let me reiterate, or let me say what it is for those that have heard it. I want to remind you. She got a call. This was 2019. I had just been elected Attorney General, by the way, at that time. 2019, get a call that her grandson was in jail. Erin was in jail. So they had Erin, Heather was in Waldo County, which is the county that she lives in, not the county that I lived in, but the county that she lives in. And they had some other information that made it hard to think that it wasn't me, other than of all the grandchildren, I guess I wouldn't think that she thought that I would be in jail and need bail. That aside, we've had that conversation. But thinking about that, right? I mean, fortunately, she hung up the phone, and then she called me to verify, right? Because, one of the tips about this, going to the pausing, and is that it gives you the opportunity to verify. But I say that because I don't know that I've heard too much about the grandparent scam recently. That's not to say that it's not still happening, but going to the Facebook comment, Andrew, that you just made, we put information out there. And AI, artificial intelligence, right? We all know what AI, I hope all know what AI is, that is making it easier. Erin, I'm wondering if in the work that you're doing, have you been able to sort of keep up on what are some of the more the trending aspects of scams? So you mentioned the cryptocurrency. We've all talked about that a little bit. That seems to be a way in which people are being focused, right? Because of how accessible the cryptocurrency platforms can be, whether it be by a kiosk, right, at your local convenience store, or whether it be online at your home. Erin, what are you seeing, what are you talking to people about as to what is trending today on how scammers are getting to people?
Yeah, we do something at Operation Shamrock called Survivor Stories, and on Fridays we speak to victims about what they experienced, and there we're looking for the gaps in law enforcement, in banking, and social media. And the one that we're hearing more often than any recently has all of the hallmarks of what Liz was talking about in terms of authority, adrenaline raising, and money needing to be moved immediately, and the isolation that my colleague from the U.S. Attorney's Office mentioned. And what it is they're going after either naturalized Americans or Americans from another country living in the United States. And they are saying, we are calling from the Indian embassy and you have a warrant in India for stuff you haven't done in India. And they're really playing on the heightened fear of people from outside the United States that are living inside the United States. Of my last 6 calls with victims, 5 of 6 have been about that. And so that's one way, but the mechanism is the same. We're seeing a lot of people that have been scared by believing they have tax money due, or that they didn't, there's an arrest warrant, or that they didn't show up for jury duty. And so I think what I think about is, I love the idea that we would think to reflect before we do it. But I think we have to come at this a different way, because I even know from my own experience that I've clicked on things because of a heightened response. And it's hard to counsel that, like, hey, when you're in a heightened response, reflect, because that's not where you are. I think we need to be coming at things from the idea that there is going to be 2 scams in your email box today. Can you figure out which ones they are? You are going to get a scam text message today. I think we need to start every day knowing that they are coming for us and be on the lookout for it, because it's just that ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
In picking up on that, Andrew, I know we were talking before the panel about a recent scam attempt that involved the U.S. Attorney's Office. Right?
That's right. So we just had...
It didn't involve, I'm sorry, it didn't involve...
Right, exactly.
To be clear.
They used our name. Thank you, Erin, for that clarification. But yeah, there was information going around that the scammers were calling people saying that they were from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and as you suggested, not asking for money, but asking for PII, personally identifiable information, to be able to use that to get money. So we ended up having to put onto our website, which was a little tricky to figure out, a header that basically said, the U.S. Attorney's Office is not calling you, and if you are getting a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office, it's a scam. But that went on, and I believe the header is still up there. So yeah, it's happening even to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And Liz, when we were talking earlier, you had also met, so in addition to that part of the conversation, I think you had mentioned that romance, really continues to drive. We just had Valentine's Day, right? And the extent to which the isolation might be targeted through scams like this. I think you were describing that is still a really significant way in which scammers currently are targeting people.
Absolutely. So at the Fraud Watch Network helpline, people can call it to report a scam or get support if they or a loved one have fallen victim. And last year, for the first time, romance scams were in the top 5. They actually were number 3. And you said it's not just Valentine's Day, it's year round. And it's still number 3 on the most frequently reported scams to us. And we have so many being reported to us that we in our support group offer sessions just for romance scam victims, and we're having to increase that number because so many people are on the wait list. They're just heartbreaking.
Could I just follow up on something that Erin said a moment ago? Is we have at the U.S. Attorney's Office and throughout all DOJ components an annual training, the Computer Security Awareness Training. And it talks about not being victim to providing information or getting scammed. And there's a couple of messages I think were important. First of all is that it always is the personal connection that they're attempting to draw to you. That's the way that they're trying to get you. I mean, the DOJ probably has the best firewalls in the world, I would guess, in terms of stopping emails or other things getting through, but they still do. And then another thing that we do throughout the year is sort of along the lines about Erin was talking as well, they actually will send us fake emails, our computer group will. And it's surprising because you'd like to think that we're a group that would be very hesitant to click on those things. But I've managed not to do it yet, but I've had colleagues who have, and sometimes they'll send you things like, performance improvement plan for Andrew McCormack. Well, I just had a review. I didn't know I was in trouble. So I'm immediately going to click on the PDF. And again, that's sort of a version of that being under the ether, right? Until I step back for a moment and said, wait a minute, they're not going to send me a PDF. But we do testing throughout the year like that. And again, these are, AUSAs who work on these cases consistently, and people will click on these emails and fail the test that came from the computer group. So.
Remember, this can happen to anyone. Again, a point that you really should walk away with is that the reason in which you should think about how to apply this in your life is because it really could happen to anyone. It's not dependent upon how much money you have or don't have, how much education you have or don't have, how old you are or not old, right? It's just, it could happen to anyone. Also, we've seen some texts like DMV, BMV type texts. The extended warranty phone calls seem to have subsided, if anybody ever thought that was a thing. But people did, and they got scammed, and they were going on for a while. But I know I just got my text last week about how the DMV, by the way, in Maine, it's the BMV, not the DMV, so that's a good sign for you right there. I want to transition us to sort of, how, maybe first, like, you believe that you or someone that you love or know has been a victim of scam. Erin, I'm going to start with you, please, because you did touch upon this in your comments, and I want to give you the opportunity to tee it back up for us. If you believe that you have been the victim, or if you believe you're talking to somebody who's being targeted by a scammer, how do you start that conversation? How do you, who do you call? Where do you find support? What do you do? Can you just sort of talk about what you think about doing?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you should do when you realize that you are involved in a scam is to contact your financial institution and let them know what has happened and see if there is any means of recalling the funds that have sent. And usually the answer is going to be no, but we need to be letting our financial institutions know how big this problem is. The next place you need to go is local law enforcement. And local law enforcement is getting better and better about receiving this information. But even if they don't, you need to be your own advocate, because we are in a world of needing to let everybody know how big this problem is. So you need to let your local jurisdiction know that, yes, they've got cryptocurrency crime in their jurisdiction that maybe they weren't aware of. And you need to be your own advocate. You need to ask for a financial crimes detective, and you need to explain what this likely is, and that this isn't just, the normal scam that they want to toss aside. And we need to start advocating for victims to be heard by law enforcement. And the last place that you really need to, without a doubt, is you need to file a report with the FBI's online presence at IC3. I talked a little bit about how our data is not great, and our data is not great because people don't want to report this crime. I can tell you there are 6 people in my immediate circle who have been involved in some sort of scam over the past 12 months, and not one has reported it to IC3. So if my people who know what I do are not reporting it, then that tells me that it's 2x, 3x that with elsewhere, that people just don't want to report this. And as a result, we aren't able to properly resource this. So because people don't realize how big this problem is. So the more and more we can provide accurate data of how massive this problem is, the more likely we are to get local investigators who are who have the ability to trace on the blockchain, the more we can resource prosecutors to be able to put the bigger cases together at the U.S. Attorney's Office that will start doing something about this. And so that's one piece of it. The other piece is also if this is happening to someone we know, we need to be empathetic and caring, and we need to let them know. I mean, every call I have starts off with, Erin, I'm not stupid. Oh, I know you're not stupid. They're that good. This is what they do all day, every day. You are no match for a trained thief that has been provided with psychological tricks to get you to do this. So I think it's being upfront about what happened, and also being super empathetic about the fact that this did happen.
And Liz, could you pick up a little bit on that? Really on two things. One, you can also look to AARP to make a report. I appreciated that opportunity on the AARP website that you can report through there. But can you also talk a little bit about how the conversations that you've had with victims of scams, adding to what Erin just described there?
Absolutely, and I completely agree with everything Erin said. So AARP Fraud Watch Network, we're also a resource where you can report. So you can call our Fraud Watch Network helpline at 877-908-3360, and you can get that one-on-one support for either you or your loved one. And we do share the data that's reported to us with the Federal Trade Commission, and that gets rolled out in what they put out each year in the Consumer Sentinel Data Book. But to build on what you were asking and what Erin was saying, fraud victims deserve respect and empathy, and the words and tone we use matter. And we hear it every day from the people we talk to, from the fraud survivors we talk to. They blame themselves. They say, how could I be so stupid? I was so foolish. This is all my fault. Like, I willingly gave them money. No, you were the victim of a crime. And so we say to folks, if you need to start the conversation with your loved one, first of all, come at it with a kind tone. Be gentle. Show kindness. And, start by asking questions. Eventually, they can become more specific questions, because ideally what you want to do is guide your loved one in the direction of helping them to realize that they are being victimized, instead of you coming at them, accusing them, say, like, I know you gave your money to that criminal in that scam. So we have some great tips on our website, aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork, but you can also call our helpline. If you need help figuring out how to start that conversation, our trained staff and volunteers can help you. And then last, we do have a website, aarp.org/saythis. It talks more about victim blame and shame. There's some videos there that talk about the impact and all of that. And I think looking into that can help you figure out your mindset and tone as you go to start that discussion.
So Andrew, I want to turn to you on at this point, because IC3 was mentioned, right? This is a platform through the Federal Trade Commission that collects up a lot of different information from different states, from the federal government, of all the different fraud that's happening there. And we've heard it from Erin, we've heard it from Liz, and I hope I can say that we'll hear it from you. There really is no wrong door, because if they call AARP, or if they call the U.S. Attorney's Office, if they call the Office of the Maine Attorney General, we are reporting into those same systems. Can you talk a little bit about, hopefully to corroborate what it was that Erin and Liz were saying about how to report it in and what happens with the information, but then can you talk a little bit about your understanding about how that information is then used, whether it be locally or nationally, to try to address the behavior that we're experiencing?
Right. So I think that Erin had talked about, when I was asked what website I would recommend, and there's lots of different websites, but for us it would be ic3.gov, because that's going to be the website where all of those scams, and they're not just for elder fraud, it's also for a variety of different fraud, but anything that has to do with cyber fraud is going to be reported there. But I think that the goal would be, and I mean, look, I think the elder fraud initiative started a decade ago because there was a movement about that there's issues going on here, right? And I think to Erin's point is that the more information that goes out there and the more charts that we see, disturbingly enough, about the amount of billions of dollars that are being lost here, that will motivate, additional dedicated prosecutors to work on those cases, additional FBI agents to work on those cases, and that's what the hope is. I think what we're not going to do to solve this, and not that it'll be ever completely solved, is picking off one case at a time. I just don't think I think that it's got to be sort of the larger way that Erin's talking about doing it, and through education is the way that we're going to be able to try to get on top of this issue. And I can prosecute one case at a time, but it's not the best use of resources in order to really stop the flow of all these cases.
Now, I see somebody at the microphone. This actually works out pretty well because in my mind, I had that we were going to leave time for questions. I'm usually not good at that. And so this is a perfect opportunity if it looks like maybe we have a question from online or...
We do. A couple of our online.
And then at this point in time, I think it is a good opportunity to take some questions. If those of you in the audience may have a question, there are microphones. As you can see, demonstrated by Grace there right now. But why don't we start first with a question from online?
Okay. This watcher would like to know how emails and phone numbers are spoofed because they look so real, and also if there's a recommendation to identify scams in email.
I'm going to go to Erin on that. Erin, did you hear the question okay?
I did.
Yeah, I'm going to toss it to you.
Let me start with the second piece first. Okay, so when you get an email and you're not sure if it's real, the first thing you should do is hover your cursor above who the sender is. And frequently, if you think it's coming from AARP Maine, you'll hover above it and you'll see it's a gobbledygook of letters and numbers, and you'll realize, oh, this is not AARP Maine at all. They can overwrite. They'll have whatever email address they have, and then they will direct the computer to show it to you as AARP Maine. But in fact, it's gobbledygook. So that's always a really easy tell of where something is coming from. Now, as for how they do it, I don't know the tech. But what I will tell you is they do it, and they do it easily. And it looks very clear on your phone that you are getting a call from the sheriff's department. And something we haven't touched on this at all is we've got a major problem coming out of Georgia prisons, where Georgia prisons are running, insiders inside Georgia prisons, convicted felons, are running scams, making you believe that they are your local sheriff. And they sound just like your local sheriff. And ultimately, you'll be instructed to move money via Cash App, and their baby mamas outside the prison walls will be cashing that money out. It's a major, major problem that needs intervention on American soil. But they are able to spoof those calls easily and make you believe that it's coming from your sheriff. So the fact is, with all of this, you cannot trust anything. If your sheriff's department is calling you, say, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry if this is inconvenient for you, but I'm going to get off the phone and I'm going to call your department. And then you go and you find the actual number for that sheriff's department and you call yourself. That is the only way we can protect ourselves, is constantly being vigilant about, let me make sure you are who you say you are.
And can I just follow up quickly on that, Erin? It's interesting because I literally just did this training, but that independent verification is so important, right? If somebody's calling from your bank, first of all, your bank is probably not calling you, but if somebody's calling from your bank and you have any questions about it, well, frankly, if your bank is calling, do it anyhow. You can just say, I don't know what this is, go to your bank card that you have and call that number. And that independent verification, because again, in the under ether type of scenario, what they'll do in the email is they'll say, we're asking you about this, and then they'll provide you a number to call, which isn't actually your bank's number. So again, that independent verification that has nothing to do with the scammer is the best way to avoid getting caught up.
Absolutely agree. And we do have resources on the Fraud Watch Network website. Senior Planet that I mentioned earlier, they have resources, kind of exercises to help walk you through figuring out whether something is or isn't legitimate, like activities there. And then you can always, I'm going to sound like a broken record, you can always call the Fraud Watch Network helpline, if you want help figuring out if something is or isn't legitimate. But I love what was said. Do your research, take the time to independently verify, because it could mean saving your life savings.
I'm going to, thank you very much. I'm going to start over here.
Thank you. This question is for the gentleman in the middle. In the state of Maine, when we talk about elder abuse, what percentage of elder abuse is occurring from cyber and what percentage is occurring from family members and caregivers?
So I should say that I don't know what the percentages are. And I will say this also, is that and I think Erin probably will be able to better answer the stuff about that deals with caregivers, because often those don't rise up. They don't have, I don't want to get into the details about it, but there's federal requirements about having an interstate nexus component, right, which often aren't met in those situations where you've got home caregivers. So what I'm seeing primarily are the economic frauds and sometimes nursing home issues as well too, which have an interstate nexus component. I will say though, because I have been going to these things for the past decade, that abuse that's taking place by people who know the financial abuse is taking place, I think that far outnumbers what it is that I'm dealing with in terms of cybercrime. Now, I could be wrong on that, but my understanding is that is often the way that abuse takes place is through friends or neighbors or caregivers are often taking advantage of the people that they're watching.
And Liz, I don't know how much you might see, because it really is sort of maybe two sides of the same coin at getting at somebody and taking advantage of the relationship that they might have, right? You have the scam, and then you do have what would be better termed financial abuse, right? Are you seeing any of that in the victims that you're talking with as well?
Most of the folks we talk to, it focuses on the stranger danger, right? Like the unknown perpetrators versus the known perpetrators. So I don't have any breakdown of that, but we do have a wonderful gentleman who I think has come to Maine before, Paul Greenwood. He's former Deputy District Attorney of San Diego County. I know Erin knows him, but he does presentations in community that talks about both types. So I can certainly reach out to him to find out if he knows the breakdown.
Yeah, and only because it was teed up. I can't speak to the percentages myself. What I can speak to is that you do have an increasing awareness of financial abuse that's occurring because of the relationship, that's being taken advantage of, whether it be a son, daughter, grandchild, loved one, right? And what is encouraging is that you do see local law enforcement becoming a lot more able, and local financial institutions and local, whether it be like retirement planners or banks or credit unions, there's just an increased sophistication about how to look out for and train for that. So an important question. It's a way in which we should also be concerned. But bring us back to scams. I'm going to go to the next question here.
So since we're in Maine, we've been hearing that there's a big new scam about deed fraud. And many people in Maine have camps that they're not at all the time, or we have out-of-state property owners. And the sergeant that we heard speak was his in-laws were in Kennebunk, and they wanted to buy a piece of property in Freeport, and they had a realtor, and the seller of the property was not really getting back to them. So finally, the realtor did some research, and it was a scammer who had really taken this out-of-state owner's property and put it into his name and changes the address. So I had happened to ask a question, are you more vulnerable if you have a mortgage on your property or if your property is paid off? And they said you're more vulnerable if your property's been paid off because there's less oversight. It's just you and the scammer. So I got very afraid, and Cumberland County, fortunately, and I think there's a number of counties in Maine, at the Registry of Deeds, we could put an alert on our names of the property owners. And then if anyone comes and tries to change the ownership of our property, we would get an alert. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think we are, the best example of deed fraud that I can think of was Elvis's mansion, right? Was Graceland, where there was some deed fraud that had occurred there that got some attention. There was some evidence that it may be trying to trickle into Maine. It's a scam that seems to be focused right now on real estate agents, right? Getting real estate agents to list property that is owned by them. But the legislature did have a task force on this last session. I actually sat on that task force, and so there is at least a legislative awareness about maybe how to prevent it from getting too much into Maine. Sir.
Something just a little bit different. We recently had trouble with our computer and shut it off. And the next day I had my computer guy come in and look at it remotely. And he spent about a half hour. And what he found was there were 2 people who had remote access to my computer. And he went in and deleted everything he could find and cleaned it all up. But that just scared the bejimmity out of me. 2 people had remote access to my computer. Is that something we're seeing now?
I'm going to throw this to Liz.
I think Erin wanted to
I'm going to
grab
throw
it
this
first.
to Erin through Liz.
I saw her move her hand.
No, I mean, either way, Liz, but what I would say is, yes, this is a major problem, and it's a major problem, particularly among seniors. And I will say that they get hit frequently with the pop-up scam, and that is they are going about their business on their computer, something comes up, and they believe that it'll be a loud noise, it'll be something, and they will believe that there's a virus on their computer and they need to call Microsoft. There'll be a phone number on their screen. They'll call Microsoft and they will absolutely believe that person is genuinely helping you, and you will give them access to your computer. Now, I don't know if you did that. I would suspect that there was some incident in which you gave someone access to your computer, not really understanding that was what was happening and that they could remain in access of your computer. And also, this is another thing I was talking about in terms of this is the next step in these international scam sites, is they are doing exactly that. They're getting you to click on things that is injecting remote access capability onto your computer. So yes, this is a major problem. We should be scared. We should be very scared, because that helps us be more suspicious and cautious about what's happening. Liz, did I miss something? You got any?
No, I agree with what you were saying. And I was going to say one of the tips we give for hardening the target, like, again, we want people to feel empowered. So we like to give tips for how people can keep themselves and their loved ones safe. So one of the tips we give is to set your antivirus software and software updates to automatic. Like, make sure you have those forces in place to protect your devices. And another tip is just don't click on unknown links, because you may get the malware on your computer or things that you're not aware of. So, and the third thing I want to mention is Senior Planet again, but they have a toll-free hotline, I believe, where you can call and get assistance with tech support.
Anything to add, Andrew?
No, I was just going to say that my understanding for remote access has always been that you have to sort of affirmatively provide some access to your computer. I'm not saying that we're going to remotely control your computer, but that's generally the way that it gets done. So I would definitely do some digging. I don't think that if you're just on your computer and you haven't clicked something that allows somebody to get access that it would, but I'm not sure what happened in that particular instance.
I want to highlight something that Erin West had said there before about the loud noise, the pop-up loud noise generates some activity. We did just see reporting in Maine of that type of fraud starting and leading to a $1.3 million loss. It is happening here, and so the extent to which it's good that you have a computer guy, sir, by the way, that you trust, that you could go and figure out, as opposed to just sort of trying to figure it out on your own, because making sure that you're doing your due diligence, before something worse happens or before something bad happens is important. Miss.
Yes, thank you. I am pretty aware of a lot of types of fraud, but I always wondered, this question is for Erin, how they got the people, the regular ordinary people, to do what they did. And so after I got over the urge to throw up after watching your presentation, I want to now know where and how I can get access to that particular presentation, if you have one, so that I can show it to point anyone I know to it. Is that just something you did today, or is that a link that I can safely click on to get people there?
So what I'll tell you is there is some information on my website at operationshamrock.org. I will also send you my slides. If you reach out to me, I am at Erin at operationshamrock.org, and I'll share my slides. My job is to let everybody know how big this problem is, so I'm happy to provide access to information that helps you do that.
Okay, thank you. And I have a second question. What is the number one quick and fast thing anybody can do to, right now today, they go sit in their car after this, to protect either your bank account or your money?
Credit freeze.
A credit freeze. Okay, so what is that?
So there are a number of different credit bureaus like Equifax, and if you Google credit freeze, and then you essentially, no one is able to open any accounts in your name. It essentially freezes your social security number, your name, your PIN, so nobody can open any accounts without your permission. Now, this can be a problem if you are wanting to buy a house or you're wanting to get financing for a car. You need to allow yourself access, so you need to unfreeze your credit. But this is the easiest way to keep your personal information secure from anybody else using it.
Wonderful, thank you.
And if I could add to that, make sure you grab a copy of the brochure that's out there. You can go to annualcreditreport.com. And so Erin was mentioning that Equifax TransUnion experience. So grab this booklet and go to that website, and that's all the information you need to put that credit freeze in place.
Thank you.
I love that AARP is always set up. Like, I'll know the answer, and AARP will be like, yep, well, we've already got that. Yep, here's a brochure. Yep, go to Senior Planet. Yep, I mean, AARP has done an incredible job at assessing the issues and providing valuable information. And it's amazing that what we think of, what was the website somebody's asking online, Liz?
Annualcreditreport.com.
Okay.
So I see three more questions. So we're going to try to get through these three, and then we'll wrap it on up.
I was thinking about Erin's list of people in Cambodia, the thousands of enslaved thieves. Are they all being released? Because they seem like if you could be there at the door when they left, they would be a great source.
And Erin,
Absolutely.
I'm going to add to that question too, because the human trafficking that's involved here is significant. If you could, in answering that question, if you could talk really about how, these folks are indeed being forced into this work.
Right. So there are very few people who are in this business willingly. They thought they were getting a different job. They got this job. And what happens is I'll get contacted by people on the inside, and they'll say, here's where I am. Can you help me get out? And the fact is there's really not much any of us can do at this time. There's a small community of people who try to get people out of these centers. What I will tell you is, and Andrew, what I will say is that I think that your prosecutions do so much more than you think. What DOJ did this year is they indicted a kingpin. They indicted Chen Zhe, and he was one of the massive bad guys in Cambodia. And what that did is have a major ripple effect. And people got scared. People running compounds that are all run by Chinese organized criminals got scared, and they let a lot of people out. And so we've got a new problem, because the new problem is a humanitarian crisis. We have people from Africa who have, which is what I'm doing with Uganda, is that have been brought there, and they don't have the resources to get home. And now they're on the streets of Cambodia, and now Chinese organized criminals are trying to pick them back up and take them in. But you are absolutely 100% right when you say they are amazing sources of what is happening inside. And I've spent a lot of time with them. And if you listen to my podcast, you can hear from them directly about what goes on inside those scam compounds. Unfortunately, the problem is that they limit their access to what I really want to know about. And what I really want to know about is, how are you laundering all of this money? Because we have never seen a wealth transfer this big. We are talking about generational wealth being transferred into the hands of bad actors. So while my new colleagues who've been out of these facilities can tell us a lot about how they do the scamming, they don't have that much information about how the money moves. And I hope that answers your question.
Sir.
Yeah, first I wanted to thank AARP for focusing on this issue, since it's so important and we are just starting to hear about it. One of the things I've noticed here is, in the ecosystem of the criminal, we're seeing both an offensive and defensive stage going on. And what I'm hearing here is much of the offensive stage from the criminal's point of view, and little on the defensive stage from the personal point of view, apart from education. What are we doing to create a defensive, instead of a reactive, a proactive position to deal with this? For instance, I had actually a cybercrime committed against me quite a while ago, and got involved with Chase Bank, my bank, because in order to correct it, I had to freeze my accounts and do everything else. And as a result, Chase put a marker on me, and 2 months later, they called me up and they said, "Did you just charge gasoline in Brooklyn?" And I said, "I'm not in Brooklyn or anywhere near Brooklyn. No, it wasn't me." Boom. That was a proactive example of how they deal with this. I get from Apple all the time, "This is possibly a scam," or phone calls and everything else. And having been in the technological leading edge development my whole career, I know how easy it is to scam telephone numbers. I know how easy it is to find IP addresses, to scam email addresses, how easy it is to really get into an account and infect it with viruses. For instance, I'm told I owe South Portland Fire Department $1,000. I don't know why. But the question is, are we having a focus on the proactive, defensive position other than just educating? Because by the time it happens, it's too late to be proactive. We're all reactive. The crime has already been committed.
Who wants to?
I'll speak to that. So what I will say is, you're right if you are under the impression that our response has been slow in coming. I agree with you. I would say that there is the tables are that we're moving, and I say that as someone who is very much a cynic and very much disappointed with the national response to this. What I will say is that there is now a federal strike force that is going after this, that there is now a lot of interest on the Hill about this, and that there are various legislative proposals that are floating that will make things better. But I think you are right in calling out that what is really needed here, and this has been called out by me since 2022 and by the Aspen Institute since last year and by Ken Westbrook and by so many others, is that what this demands is a national response led by an identified leader in the United States with authority. And that leader needs to bring together all of the stakeholders and hold each other accountable. That our response has been not enough and not fast enough. And we can't move things at the speed of government anymore. We need to put pressure on companies within the United States that could do better. We need to put pressure on law enforcement to develop their capability and to do more about this. We need to be proactive. It is not a secret that Southeast Asia is riddled with organized criminals that are identifiable. Before I got on this call, I spent the last 3 hours on Telegram, where all of this is open source. You can find out who is running compounds. Like, this is doable. And I think we need to start moving from the perspective that this is doable. It's hard, but it's doable and it must be done. And unfortunately, I think it takes more demand for it to be done. It takes more letters from people like you saying, I need better, I need more, I need support. And until it gets to the highest levels of government where they really put someone on this, we are going to continue to keep asking people to do things and asking people to do better instead of mandating that it must be done better.
Thank you.
And then, only because I see the cane coming, because time is just about up, we have one more question. No pressure.
Not a question, just a comment and affirming the putting a hold on your credit bureau. I did that as a power of attorney for my brother who was transitioning into Alzheimer's and still thought he could do a lot of good and, was taking care of business. I would have to say, I got a call from I decided best to put a hold on the credit bureau with the credit bureaus. I'd got a call from his bank saying that he had made an application for a credit card, and but it was denied by the credit bureau, and that of course my name was identified there and the phone number, and I said no, it's not approved, and it did appear that the caregiver had enticed him to do the presentation, did all the work, and of course he could sign his name still. So I alert people. I suggest if you're power of attorney or in charge of somebody else's finances, please put a hold on the credit bureau. I decided to put a hold on it for myself, and good idea, I thought it is. But you do need to keep safe the passwords to be able to access and I don't have any idea where my passwords are.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Good luck in finding that password. But thank you for that reaffirming statement. So just in wrapping up, I'm going to give all of our panelists one quick wrap up. AARP has a lot of information, by the way. I did go on, and there's not only are there helpful articles and sort of tutorials, if you will, but I think that if nothing else, if you take away the AARP address and website in order to get information, that would be a great takeaway.
AARP.org/fraudwatch network is your one-stop shop. And if you or a loved one have fallen victim, please call our helpline, 877-908-3360.
Andrew.
And I would just ask again that if you're a victim of fraud, reach out to ic3.gov. It's run by the FBI. And if there's a cyber fraud involving you, please alert that website.
Erin, final words.
Yeah, get loud, people. Get loud, get aggressive, because this isn't going to stop until we demand more. So call it out, write letters, use the time that you have to push this agenda forward.
And that's our panel. Thank you all for your attention.
Hello, everyone. I'm Grace McCarthy, and I'm one of the members of the Maine Fraud Watch volunteers. We wrap up today's session event. I want to begin with a heartfelt thank you, first to our partners at USM. They've helped us in more ways than we can even count. And then thank you for our partners who shared their wonderful resources with our audience. Bangor Savings Bank, Southern Maine Agency on Aging, Maine Office of Securities, York County Elder Abuse Task Force, and Maine Bureau of Consumer Credit Protection. To our featured panelists, thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, and your real-life insights with us. Your perspectives help turn a complex and often frightening situation into practical knowledge that people can use themselves and they can pass on to people they care about. And to all of you in our audience, either in person or virtually, we thank you for showing up and for your time this morning. Your questions have been great, and thank you for being part of this conversation. Awareness is our strongest tool against scammers, and what you've learned today can make a real difference. Fraud fighting is a community event. Please share it, whatever you've learned today, with your friends. Thank you again for being here with us. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And remember, if you can spot a scam, you can stop a scam. Thank you.